Okay guys, it's a Saturday afternoon. I had to work today, but we're going to do part one of the hot pepper drop. So this evening we're going to do the rear springs, and let's see if I can't get them gonna go. Let's see how long this takes. I'm going to actually time it to see how long it takes so you guys will know. And this will be part one, just doing the rear springs. Okay guys, if we're measuring the wheel gap right now from the fender to the top of the tire, I would say is very close to, it's hard to see, 6 inches. So 3.5. It's going to close that up quite a bit, but it's not going to be slammed. In the front, the lowering springs are going to lower it 2 inches, and right now the gap is right at about, it's going to again be hard for you guys to see, the gap is right around 4.5. so if we lower it 2, we're still going to have a 2.5 inch gap. Some of you guys tuned in for the last video where we did reveal the Motegi wheels, and we are doing the rear drop. Now, due to time constraints, I could not take you through every step of doing the rear drop, but I can tell you some very helpful tips that I learned along the way. And if any of you all have gotten your Eibach lowering springs, you know that the directions are only going to tell you things to do and don't do, and they will also tell you which part of the bump stops that you are to cut off on the front struts, and the amount, well, you have to actually, they have actual bump stops that you have to put in, swap out for the rear. But I'm going to walk you through what I learned so that you guys will be able to do it more efficiently and with some direction more than I had. I'm your guinea pig, so you don't have to be. So first thing to be known, the directions are very minimal that you get with the Eibach springs. Why would I do the back and then do the rear? Well, we ran out of time for one, and two, I heard some people say that they had problems with noises that they had after installing the lowering springs. Well, by putting on the rear first and then doing, I'm your guinea pig, so you don't have to be. So first thing to be known, the directions are very minimal that you get with the Eibach springs. Why would I do the back and then do the rear? Well, we ran out of time for one, and two, I heard some people say that they had problems with noises that they had after installing the lowering springs. Well, by putting on the rear first and then doing the front later, I'm able to isolate any noises that may occur, any differences in ride prior to doing the front and the rear, so that you'll know, you'll be able to isolate your issues to the rear. So let's get busy and I'll show you exactly what I did. Okay guys, the second thing you're going to have to do is get the vehicle up, and you need to get both the left and the right rear supported on jack stands. That is a must. Has to be up off the ground high enough so that you'll be able to drop both rear sides of suspension down at the same time, and I'm going to tell you why that is important and why you need to do that. Where you see the jack at right now is approximately where I had the jack stands positioned when I did the rear swap on Saturday night. Due to the rain, we weren't able to get back to do the front, so I'm going to do the front today, and you'll see that in another video. So I'm going to go over the tools that you will need to get the job done. The main primary tool you will need is an 18 millimeter box wrench, and an 18 millimeter socket. Something, I used a 1/2 inch ratchet because you're going to need something with pretty good power. It would help if you had an impact, but if you're strong and enthusiastic, you can do it without an impact. So I'm going to get the wheel off and then we'll go from there. Now we have ridden around with the rear wheel the rear lowering springs in for a couple of days, and I do that for a couple of reasons. One is going to give the suspension time to settle, because everybody who has changed and done lowering springs notice you need to let the suspension settle. And I also did that before I did the front, so I could see if there was any issues, rubbing or otherwise, on the rear. And as I will turn the camera around, you'll be able to see that there's no rubbing, there's no noises. I'm very impressed so far with this lowering spring deal. So if you look inside the rear cover, there is no marks of any sort, shape, or otherwise. And you look at the tire, there is nothing rubbed, and it is in excellent shape, just as you would expect. Now I'm going to run through the things that you're going to have to do. As you can see, my springs are already installed, so I'll be able to give you a pretty good rundown of what you need to do. First thing you're going to do is pull this clip out right here. Pull that clip out, wiggle that hose, pop it down, and then there's clips on the back side. Pop the clips, pop the hose out of the clips, and let that drape down through the hole, because you're going to need to drop the entire rear down. And I'm going to tell you a mistake that I made, and hopefully you won't make the same mistake. Second thing that you're going to do, after you see this place right here, this is going to be approximately where you put your jack stands at. Put them under there. Now if you're not comfortable, you don't know what you're doing, don't get under the car with jack stands, because you're not going to put them on there right, and the car is going to fall on you, and then you want to be holding me liable because I told you what to do. So that's where the jack stands are going to be positioned, right where that jack is right there now. But this is just for illustration purposes. You suit to do your own yourself, and hopefully you're responsible and knowledgeable enough to do it. Now the second thing you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and take a rolling floor jack, and you're going to position it right up under here, not under the shock, but under the spring cup thing over here, right over here, right there where my finger's pointing, right there. You can put the rolling floor jack. You actually can put it under the shock area if you want to, but you're going to need to get the weight. You're going to need to get the weight, be able to lift it up. You're going to lift the suspension up. Make sure you don't lift it up and pull it out and pull the suspension off of the jack. You just want to get the pressure off of it. Then after you do that, you're going to undo these two bolts. This one here, the top shock mounts. After you do that, you're going to get all the way down. And that's why I told you maybe you shouldn't put your rolling floor jack there, because down here there is the lower shock bolt. Now this one on the back side, toward the inside of the vehicle, toward that way, you don't have to worry about that. You just need an 18 millimeter to get on this one right here. Notice how there's a mark on those threads. When you get done, that's where it was tightened to when I started, and when I got done, that's where it should be tightened, and those marks should line up. But that, you're going to remove that bolt. Now after you do all of that, the upper and the lower shock bolts, you're going to leave the pressure of the jack on the rear end. It should be still pressurized. Now you're going to let the rear end down, and then you're going to slide the shock off of the top first. You're going to pull, after you pull these bolts, you're going to pull this out, and then you'll be able to flip this whole shock back, and you'll be able to slide it out. Now that's the easy part. Where I ran into trouble is after I got the shock out, I lowered the jack all the way down and I still couldn't get the spring out. I'm like, what in the world? Well, the first thing that I didn't do that I've already told you to do is to undo those brake hoses. Those brake hoses were holding the rear from going down far enough. But the other thing you're going to need to do, you're going to get the vehicle up on 2 jack stands. Now, when you lower that rear down, the only way it's going to come down all the way far enough for you to get the springs out is for you to have both shocks loose. So you're going to do everything that I told you just now on this first side. Go over and do the same thing on the other side, because you've got the vehicle off the ground already. Go over, take the floor jack, get the other side done too. Now that you have both sides are loose, you'll be able to press the rear down far enough with your body. Now I do weigh 240 pounds and I was putting my weight on it. I was able to push the rear end down far enough and pull the springs out. Before you do that, make sure you look at the orientation of, and I'm going to turn the camera around, these spring cups, or what do you call them? Spring snubbers. There's a technical word for these, and maybe I'll put a sticker above it since I can't remember it right now. But anyway, on this top one, you'll see, if you look around the back, if you look up here, there's a flat side. That flat side has to fit right up in there, just like that. See where my finger is? Hope you can see that. And you want to make sure that the bottom spring snubber is also, you're going to have to look at it when you pull your spring out. You're going to have to articulate the spring, put it into the cup and turn it so it locks. It's a notch. It has to be turned into the notch. Make sure you check 2 things. One, that you have it securely in both notches on both sides. The second thing you want to make sure of is that you have the left side on the left side and the right side on the right side. And no, anytime you're talking about a car, the left is the driver's side and the right is the passenger side. Because there are people who are like, oh, it's on the left. They're looking directly at the front of the vehicle and looking at the left and calling the left the right and the right the left. So make sure the other thing is, when you install those springs, that the Eibach name will be facing so you can read it, not upside down. If you have it upside down, you have the wrong spring on one or the other. But both of the springs are marked. Look at your directions. It does list those springs and they both have a different number. Okay? So after you get that spring out, before you can put the other springs in, what you're going to do is you're going to take your shock. Now, once you pull this shock out, there's a plastic cap on top of here. You have to see this little nubby right there. You're going to pop that cap off, and under that cap, the one nut, I believe it's 13 millimeter, and you're going to have to get that nut off. Now, what's going to happen? You're going to try to put a ratchet or something on it. It's going to turn and turn. It's not going to come off. Now, this next thing that I'm going to advise you to do, I can't advise you to do it because in the directions it says do not use power tools but the only way that I could get that nut off was to bump it, not slam on it, but bump it with the air impact. It's able to spin it fast enough to get it loose without it turning the whole thing. So once you get that loose, you just unloosen that, take that off. Then you'll take, I'm going to show you the next thing. This whole plastic cover right here will just slide. It'll slide straight off. Behind this plastic cover, you'll find the bump stops. Now, the kit supplied the new bump stops. You don't have to modify them. Make sure you look at which direction that you take the old ones off and put the new ones, slide them right back down over top the rod that's in the middle of this. You slide the bump stop, but then you got to push. Once you get that off of there, you're going to have to push the bump stop all the way up and have it seated at the top before you can reassemble the shock. Once you reassemble the shock, Say, lay that to the side. Get your rubber grommets on top of this one. What I did was leave the grommet in the bottom, put the grommet on top of the spring before you get up under there. Then once you get under there, insert the bottom of the spring into the grommet and turn it so that it's in the groove where it should be all the way. And when you do that, this one here is going to be lined it up perfectly, because you got to have that flat side in the back. Then you're going to push down on this spring in the rear end, just like you got it, the spring out. That's how you're going to get it back in. Make sure that it's all the way. See this little round hole in here? You got to make sure that the thing under here is lined it up. See, I can stick my finger up through there. Yeah, it's got to line up so that that's all on there and it's lined it up perfectly. Once you do that and pop that in, it's not that hard. Then what you're going to do is go over and do the other side. Do not, I repeat, do not reattach your shocks until you get both springs in. After you get both springs in and seated, raise your rolling floor jack back up to get some tension on the spring. Not a lot, just enough so that you can first put the bottom shock bolt through. Slide the shock in, slide the bolt through the bottom of the shock, and then the last thing you're going to do, you're going to jack it up and pull up on the shock enough to get these bolts started. Whatever you do, do not cross thread these bolts. Move the shock, position the jack, whatever you got to do to gently start these bolts in. Do not tighten them up, but get a good start on them so you know that they're lining up with the threads and you're not cross threading. Then what you're going to do is and get the other side in the same position. Bolt through the bottom, loosely mounted at the top. Once you have all that done, go ahead and tighten up your lower shock bolt. It's one bolt down there. Make sure you get it tight just like it came off. Line up the marks that are already on the lower shock mount bolt. Tighten that up. Then go ahead put a little pressure up on the rear end or whatever you got to do. Make sure that you get the top bolts on the shock mounts tightened. And that's basically it. Once you get there, that's it. After you get that done, don't forget to put this back in. Make sure you look at this clip when you take it out so that you know that you're putting it back in the right side up, because when you get it out, it is a little bit confusing. You say, is that the way I got it out, or is that right or not? You know, you got to make sure that you get it back in correctly. Matter of fact, let me see if that one's all the way in there. Yeah, it is. Just didn't look like it for a minute. But yeah, get that all the way back in there. And also don't forget to snap the hose back in to the little clip that's back here. After that, you are basically done. Get the vehicle back up in the air, put your wheels and tires on, let it sit down on the road, take it for a test drive. Make sure you go back, and if you don't remember tightening something, tighten it again. It's never a bad thing to double check. And that's it. See, I just saved you some time, because when I did it, let me tell you what, I got the first side down and I could not get the spring out of there. I couldn't figure it out until I realized that the rear end is not going in this one. Now this is a two-wheel drive, so this does not have independent rear suspension like you guys with the all-wheel drive model. So this is going to be for the the EcoBoost front-wheel drive. I couldn't figure out how to get that thing down, and as soon as I took the other shock down on the other side, I was able to push the rear end and also the brake hose. You got to make sure you do the brake hoses and the shocks on both sides. Once I was able to get that done, I was able to push down enough on that rear housing to push both springs out. I can tell you right now, if you don't do those two things, you're never going to get it out, because I was pushing. I tried jacking it up on the other side. Maybe we'll articulate this side down. No, it was not going to get down far enough without unloosening or taking off both sides at the same time. After that, it didn't take that long. It took me 2 hours. Now, let me tell you, one, I did those two things that I messed up on. And as I was doing it, my air impact, the nipple that goes into the air impact wrench busted off. Air flew all out of the, it just basically cleared all the air out of my compressor. I had to go around the garage, find a new nipple to go on my impact gun. The time I did all that, I had lost probably about 30 minutes to do everything because I couldn't find the nipples in the garage. So yeah, I would say if you do everything that I just told you, you could probably get it done in, if you're good, probably about an hour, maybe an hour and a half tops. Hour and 15 minutes would be real good too. So that's where we are. That's what I told you. So now you know. If you want to do it, do it. It's not that hard. If you're used to doing that kind of stuff, if you have the proper tools. I have air tools in my garage. I have every imaginable type of wrench. I have half-inch drive, 3/8 drive, all those type things. So I am pretty equipped. So if you're not comfortable, let somebody else do it. But to pay the dealer $1,600 to do the front and the back, kind of insane, right? Well, that's where we're going to do the front. So that's the first video. That's part one of hot pepper, dropping it like it's hot. Stay tuned for the next video and we'll show you what we did on the front.